So this is the next section of the presentation. So on July 5th, 2023, someone posted a very peculiar post on Reddit. From the late 2000s to the mid 2010s, I worked as a molecular biologist for a national security contractor in a program to study exobiospheric organisms, EBO. I will share with you a lot of information on this subject. Feel free to ask questions or ask for clarification. The gist is, someone posted with an incredibly detailed amount of scientific biological knowledge about a gray alien body that they had studied. Reddit has their share of knowledge of scientists, and many people couldn't debunk the level of biological detailed knowledge. Here's a post claiming that the EBO biologist had been debunked, but the post was debunked. So no such post in the claim had been posted by users mentioned, nor does the date align with when they last logged in. And there were a lot of attempts. This was actually a really huge post, and it had over 20,000 upvotes. And the person basically, exposed themselves, didn't provide any of their own credentials. So you're left with the unknown about it. But the high level of detail was astonishing. And I caught on because there were tiny, tiny details repeated with information that things that I'd experienced directly with the entities firsthand that were mentioned in his post. So I found it all very intriguing, and it was so popular, at least so recognized, that Joe Rogan even reposted it. So here he is saying, "I think there are rabbits in these holes." And again, no one debunked it, and it was a huge amount of attention, and a lot of people had trouble, calling this fake. We don't really know. Obviously, we don't really know. But the fact that it had so many corroborations with my own, and again, tiny, tiny details, which I'll go over here, I just found absolutely mind-blowing. So let's put all that together here today. I'll be reading specific paragraphs of the fairly long post and matching them up with the experiences that I had. So the EBO geneticist said, "First, I'd like to discuss their genetics. Their genetics are like ours, based on DNA. This fact was very puzzling for me when I first learned about it. We imagine that beings from an alternate biosphere would have genetics based on a completely foreign biochemical system. And surprisingly, that is not the case. Several conclusions can be drawn from this surprising revelation. The one that immediately comes to mind is that our biosphere and theirs share a common ancestry. The eukaryotes, sorry if I butchered that word, which means their cells have nuclei containing genetic material, which suggests that their biosphere would have been separated from ours sometime after the appearance of this type of organism. The term exobiospheric organism is actually a misnomer, but as it's a historical term, it's still used. Their genetics are not only based on the same genetic system, but they're also even compatible with our own cellular machinery. This means that you can take a human gene and insert it into an EBO cell, and that gene will be translated into protein. And this, of course, works in reverse with a human gene inserted into an EBO cell. This is consistent with Jean Ramirez. So he says the secret of Roswell was, yes, there was a craft. And if it was just a craft, I think the government would readily disclose that. And yes, there were outer space beings on that craft. And I think the government would disclose that eventually also. But the fact that these beings had DNA that was found in the human genome, I think that is the actual secret of Roswell. I think that is a core secret of why the government will not talk about Roswell. Because to talk about Roswell, you have to talk about the occupants in the craft. So I have always been public that I proved to myself that I have gray alien DNA merged within my human DNA. Not just because the beings themselves said it to me, but because I had very distinct moments of corroboration. When I awoke to my memory set, it included distinct moments of intuitively feeling genetically bonded to the tall grays in my 3rd and 11th contact events. You will never understand what it was like for me to wake up to memories where I'm calling gray aliens brothers, like I did in my 11th contact event. And the description from Linda Moulton Howe from her military whistleblowers matched exactly my experience. She explained the tall grays are actually the pure stock of the species, while the smaller grays are more like clone cyborg bodies. But they also told me something very intriguing, that they had put a gray human hybrid species on the planet a long time ago. And I can feel when people have this gene in them. It's the same feeling of being bonded to the grays, the tall grays. I can intuitively feel the gray alien DNA in people. And I'm certain it's the Irish gene, like druids. This archetype of druid, similar to the idea of elves and gnomes, like I experienced as I passed under the space butterfly archway in my first contact event. So, what's particularly striking about the EBO genome is the uniformity of these intergenic regions. We see the same sequences repeated everywhere, and the distance in B in between the genes is virtually the same throughout their genome. The result is a minimalist, highly condensed genome. In fact, it's much smaller than ours. Moreover, the quality of protein coding genes is even significantly lower than ours, probably due to genetic refinement, but also to biological processes that are absent in EBO. The uniformity of these sequences is a major indication of artificiality of these beings. There is no complex organism on Earth that has such elegance in its sequences. There is no evolutionary pressure that can lead to this kind of characteristic other than genetic engineering. Of course, this is exactly what the elder said to me. This is how our kind is made. So this is my third contact event, and she's showing me babies in tubes. And from her, she emanated this motherly love for these tubes, for these babies. Given the high probability of artificiality of their genome and the apparent ease of modifying it with biomolecular tools, it's not out of the question that there could be polymorphism between individuals depending on their role and function. In other words, an individual could be genetically designed to have characteristics that give it an advantage in performing a given task, like soldier ants and worker ants in an anthill. She explicitly said to me, "We are genetic manipulators, and the bodies in these tubes will have specific genetic purposes for the role each will play in our world." The skin gets studied. The gray skin that is often described in folklore is in fact a biosynthetic film which likely serves to protect the EBO from a hostile environment. It doesn't provide effective protection against temperature changes, but it does offer adequate protection against the passage of liquids. It's possible that this film confers other advantages, but my knowledge of the subject is limited. Under the gray film, the epidermis is rather white, and the texture is very regular and without any hair. We do not see any defect other than the folds near the joints. It's described as greasy in one report, and that's not something I've observed. The same report states that a strong, lingering smell of burnt hair and ammonia is present when the film is removed. There are a lot of pores on the skin crossing over the epidermis to a gland in the hypodermis. These glands and pores are the terminal port of excretory sediferous system, which could explain the previous mentioned smell. What that means is that they poop through their skin. So what's really interesting about that, no, this is just a offhand thing that I experienced that's not in my book. So as I mentioned, I have telepathy with the elder, and very early on, in the early days of me kind of awakening to this reality that this was a part of my life, she was trying to befriend me, and like my everyday life kind of thing. And of course, washroom and going to the washrooms and the shower and all is part of my life. And she's connecting. She's trying to connect, and she tells this to me that I have things I have to do as well too. And she was showing me something to do with her skin and that she wipes stuff off of her skin. I didn't quite, I didn't record that or anything. And it was just one of those offhand small details that I ended up finding very fascinating and that it was corroborated. But there's much more that I have recorded, but that's just a really interesting one. Like the skin, the eyes are covered with a semi-transparent biosynthetic film that offers the same environmental protection while providing protection against certain wavelengths and light intensity. When the film is removed, a more traditional eye is revealed. It's about 3 times larger than a human, and there are no eyelids. The size of their eyes suggests they have excellent night vision. It seems paradoxical to cover them with a semi-opaque film. Perhaps they only need to wear it in a bright environment. Well, I have let's say several of my contact events in dark environments. In the forest, in my second contact event, in the fifth contact event, lots of shaded areas. And then the specific environments that I work in with them are bright, but it's definitely like they shade out or darken a lot of the environments in the craft. In my ninth contact event, the craft is pitch black. Very weird. It's just a very dark, plastic-like black, like without any other colors except for the holograms. In my 10th contact event, I'm in a dark warehouse-like space, again with very small areas that are lit up that we'll be interacting in the aliens with, but otherwise all the environments are dark. And even when I was in the basement area, if that's what that would be called, where I saw the hybrids, it was a huge dark warehouse. My 11th contact event, also where I'm in a kind of I'm in the black craft. In my 23rd contact event, I'm in a dark office space of the elders. So it was obvious by that point that they like the dark environments. And by the 24th contact event, I deal with another pitch black cockpit, and also the environments of the base were dark as well too. So repeated content of dark environments. The brain is tetraspheric, i.e. composed of four major sections. The sections are separated by transverse and longitudinal fissures and are connected by the central lobe, which acts as a brainstem and cerebellum. The volume of the brain is around 20% superior to that of a man of the same height. It has a much more pronounced level of gyration than an average human. Moreover, the ratio of glial cells to neurons is also slightly higher than in humans. And I just want to point out that one of the feelings of being around these entities is that they are superior in intellect. And I really connected with this too, as the description of the brain, even just in a paranormal fashion. They feel intimidatingly more intelligent than humans, and it's obvious because their brains are actually just bigger and I guess process information in more complex ways. Of the brain, it is important to mention the presence of nodules on the central lobe. Historical analysis of these structures reveals a kind of intricate biological circuitry. It is speculated that these nodules are essential to interact with their technology. And I've argued in the past that they are cyborgs, not robots. But I think we have to start moving towards an idea of growing technology. And then again, AI or consciousness is fused into it. That is a real consciousness. The abdomen is wider than the thorax and bulges slightly forward. There is no navel. The pelvic bones are apparent, and there are no genitals or anus. In my 23rd contact event, she takes off her jumpsuit, and there is nothing. She's basically a Gumby. There is no signs of anything, breast, navel, and I reported that in my story. Their hands have 4 digits, including an opposable thumb on the medical side. They have no nails, and the texture of the fingerprints is composed of concentric circles. Fingers are proportionally much longer than in humans. Unlike humans, fingular musculature is entirely intrinsic in the hand. In other words, the muscles used to move the fingers are not in the forearms, but entirely located in the hands. Very interesting. And I definitely experienced the elder to have 3 fingers and a thumb, and actually even the medical beings, I report that as well too. Now, this one I love too, the respiratory system. Their cellular respiratory is equivalent to ours, i.e. they need to oxidize organic components to produce energy. Their lungs have no reciprocating action, but rather have a unidirectional flow of air, similar to those seen in birds, which is more efficient than ours. It is speculated that this is in response to the brain's elevated metabolic needs. Vocalization is produced by vibration of the wall membrane at the junction between the 2 air sacs. So I think this is one of the confusing aspects of why people think they're robots, because you don't see them breathing. You don't see any movement. They don't breathe the same way humans do. They breathe like birds. So you don't see them convulsing a diaphragm, moving up and down. And in my 7th contact event, I witnessed the elder sitting still. She's basically showing me herself on a picnic table or some kind of table, and she's basically sitting perfectly still. And it's this weird sensation, different from humans. And you could almost get the idea that she's a robot, but I distinctly point out that I don't believe she's a robot, and she's in a state of kind of being state where she just sits and does nothing. And of course she's breathing. I distinctly don't see her moving a diaphragm, and just this kind of complete stillness. And yet she is breathing because she has a different way of taking in air. I just found all that very fascinating. The digestive system is extremely underdeveloped. There's no stomach in the familiar sense. However, there is a pseudostomach located at the transition between the thoracic and abdominal cavities. This organ is not involved in digestion, but only serves as a reservoir. A sphincter controls the flow of food into the intestine. The intestine is limited to the equivalent of a small intestine, i.e., it only serves to absorb liquids and nutrients and acts as a main digestive site. Given the absence of teeth, the narrowness of rigidity of the esophagus, the absence of a true stomach, and the absence of defecation, it is strongly believed that EBOs can only consume food in liquid form. It is assumed that, given the high metabolic needs of the brains, this food would have a high carbohydrate concentration. In order to meet other metabolic needs, there must be a high protein content in the food consumed. These two statements are supported by the type of enzymes secreted by the digestive organ. It is therefore speculated that the food consumed is a sort of broth, rich in sugar and protein, which probably also has a high copper content. Given the strict limitations of the type of food that they can consume, it is unlikely that this type of creature could survive in our biosphere without technological support. So I experienced the elder drinking. Very interesting. I'm on Venus, and I go into her environment, her quote unquote home, and she gives me water, and she shows me a a liquid with tomato soup basically look to it. Now, if it had a copper, that's very interesting. He points out that which probably has a high copper content. Well, something with a high copper content would possibly look like the color of tomato soup. The elder shows me that she's drinking something. So again, just very fascinating, kind of small, tiny details that get connected with this EBO scientist. So, um, I was always kind of stuck on this one thing the elder said to me in my third contact event. Our bodies are like your invertebrates, and we plant our seeds into human mothers' wombs to make the fetuses grow to be like us. She called herself, or basically said the bodies are like the invertebrates. But what could that mean? And here we have, he actually mentioned the skeletal structure, and there definitely is a spine. But after doing my own research, very interestingly, the two details of their bodies, their actual way their bodies behave, are like the way that invertebrates behave on Earth. So excreting waste through the skin is definitely something that happens in with invertebrates. So sorry for the tearing apart of this word. Nephridiopore is what it is in worms that excrete their poop, if you will, through the skin. And I found that to be an interesting connection that she could have been meaning. And the other is asexual reproduction. So cloning is an actual part of something that you can see in invertebrates. So is that what she meant? Very interesting, but those are really distinct details of their bodies, excreting through the skin and cloning, which creates a genetic structure of asexual reproduction, which is found in invertebrates. So yeah, very fascinating stuff. The author of, okay, so this is kind of the end of this, but this section here. The author of the document added his reflections and interpretations as an appendix. He specified that for them, the soul field is not a belief, but an obvious truth. He also argues that the soul loses its individuality after death, but that memory and experience persist as part of the field. This fact would influence the philosophy and culture of EBOs, resulting in a society that doesn't fear death, but which places no importance or reverence on individuality. This belief compels them to seed life, shape it, nurture it, monitor it, and influence it for the ultimate purpose of creating this apotheosis. Paradoxically, they have little or no respect for an individual's well-being. So that line added into this document or this, this post really hit the nail on the head because this is exactly what I was told by the beings. The point to, I just want to reiterate, the belief compels them to seed life, is what they said. They seeded us, shape it, that they've been influencing us, is what David Grush has talked about. Nurture it, right? There is degrees of maybe they are partially responsible for some religious aspects of our society. Monitor it. Well, that's not too hard to imagine, and influence it for the ultimate purpose of creating this apotheosis. So I really horrible. I hope I'm not decimating that word, which I might be. But this all speaks to exactly what my book was actually about. That there is a self-realization aspect to the human that is intertwined with the purpose of why aliens interact with us or have been interacting with us. I list here my contact events that kind of describe this one sentence. The first contact event where they helped me discover my soul, even that the fact that they would do that is, just right in line with the sentence. My third contact event, they explained that they seed life. 10th contact event, well, they definitely where they explain where they try to shape it. 21st contact event, again, they seed life. And so, yeah, and this leads to humans having alien genetics, like I was told in my 23rd contact event. Okay, so that's all that from that EBO guy. There's one last part here before this is kind of the closer to the end of the presentation. And there's one last piece I wanted to cover here. So again, someone posted this on Reddit. Okay, it was just a collection of bodies, alien bodies that I think the idea is that we don't have a lot of no one's debunked them, but we don't know what these are, right? This is just internet stuff. Practically, that is what it is. Internet stuff. It is. It could all be fakes, probably, maybe. Just take a look at them. This is the Roswell one, but I know that the Roswell is very interesting because now we have people coming out saying it's real. So it's all very interesting. But just take a look at these pictures. They're all pretty strange. Now, do me a favor and look at the eyes. Take a look at all the eyes of these creatures. Right? Pretty wild, right? Now, if you notice, as I get you to focus on the eyes, notice how all the eyes are all straight and maybe they'll bend a little bit to the side. And except for one, all the eyes are straight, are, horizontal, except for one, this one. Now, of all these pictures, I don't know too much about them, but this one I learned something about, and I found it really interesting. So that picture comes from a interview called a picture from a video released in the 90s. Now it's known as the Alien Interview. That's what it got titled. And what's happening is that we're all, people are going, now that we got, confirmation that, something is going on here when it comes to UAPs and the government and people are having contact. So people are digging things up. And this fellow, John Stewart, spent several years trying to understand the origins of this video. And he was on Richard Dolan's show. What's very interesting too is that Richard Dolan's a skeptic actually, and he holds very tight to his credibility by being a skeptic. And he brought John Stewart on, this John Stewart, not any other John Stewart, this John Stewart. By the way, he's a former professional wrestler and a congressional candidate, and he spent years meticulously researching this video and seeking the truth behind it. And he approached it as if it was a hoax, but tried to say, okay, where is this hoax coming from? And he has enough information now that that Richard Dolan was convinced something is going on with this video. And it's very fascinating. I recommend, people to check this video out. And the reason I recommend that is because there's a connecting weird piece to my story with this. Remember, I mentioned the eyes. Even Susie Hansen's aliens have eyes that are kind of more sideways. Well, mine are odd. My entities all have down facing eyes. And that was just a big, distinct part of the story. That I have these, this is the medical beings, that's the twin, or these are the elders. And something is really going on here, right? Where these entities, its eyes are downward facing, very similar. Not just that, it has that jaw structure. That is the same to my entity. My entity has that jaw structure. A strange shape, actually, a very strange look and strange shape. And I just found all that kind of a very weird crossover. And so the story goes behind this. John Stewart found the doctor. He found the doctor in this video. He found there's a man over here on the left. He found the equipment that they were using. He found the location, and he actually found a person willing to give him some information off record anonymously. How the guy who there's definitely a known trail about where it comes from, and the guy was a scientist who gave this video to a production company, and that's where it all starts. And there was a paper trail that leads there, and John Stewart went further, and there was enough people to give him enough information, and they ended up finding the doctor. And the doctor's wife, he's passed away, but the wife said yes, he did work there. Yes, he that is him. Yes. So anyway, we have people on record claiming that, these aren't actors, these are actual scientists who were there. And the story of this video goes, it's very weird. It's not an alien interview. The alien was actually working at the facility, and it's actually at S2, not S4. And it's all in the John Stewart video there. It's very fascinating stuff. But anyway, the connecting piece is that the alien was working with a human in this facility, and it starts going into medical duress because he's in, on an earth environment, and it's the oxygen or something, and it starts choking, and they bring him into another room where they're filming it. And this is what this is. It's not an interview. It's a alien in medical duress that gets placed here, and then the doctors are in the environment trying to help him. On the left is the telepath who has been working with him, and now he's in the room, and the doctor's here trying to understand it. And you can see the alien's actually choking is what he's doing. Also, again, the environment is dark, right? Again, that we're dealing with dark environments with these entities. Very interesting indeed. So the point I want to make, that's another interesting connecting piece with this video, very strange, is that my entity, my elder, gives me a lot of information, like from the government perspective. And like, I'm not hearing a lot of this. I'm not hearing a lot of contactees. Like Susie Hansen doesn't have this, where the aliens are talking about their interactions with a human government. I really don't hear too much about this at all, actually. But my entity explicitly tells me information about the interactions. In fact, I got telepathy that I eventually learned was real, was corroborated. One of that is I learned from my elder through telepathy that the problem that the human race is experiencing right now with disclosure and this decades-long process is that the compartmentalization of the American government is actually the problem. The DoD, the FBI, the CIA, they all have their own investigations going into this, and entities may have been trying to convince a group of people, like what they need to be doing or what should happen. And a group agrees, but then some other outside DoD or CIA disagrees. And that compartmentalization is what caused the problems that humans are in with the entities. And I don't have that information. It doesn't come to me naturally. I'm not an American, so I didn't know the American government really when I got that information. And I would learn through the researchers, explicitly Ian Halling, to tell me that that is actually what's going on. It's obvious from the researcher's perspective that the compartmentalization of the government is a big issue. DoD, CIA, FBI, all kind of doing their own investigations, and the breaking apart made the awful problem we're about to be addressing with the aliens coming, the disclosure process. So, but the fact that my entity would be the one to give me that information, and to only know that this video somehow has a little bit of validity to it, and it's alien working with a government, I wanted to talk about it. I wanted to put it on paper. And I think we're going to find that this video was actually legitimate, and it's kind of got that Bob Lazar marks to it, where it seems to actually now have some kind of background that looks like it's real. So yeah, I just wanted to share that last piece.